This month we're looking at the hip and quite specifically the influence of the quads on the hip joint, and we're looking at how it can affect hip movement patterns, which over a longer period of time can lead to hip issues, impingement problems, OA changes, things like this. Don't happen overnight. They happen through an influence of time, and unfortunately, because we now have a habit of sitting a long time at computers, at desks and working, we tend to sit in this position. Our hip is at about 90 degrees. As a result of that, our quad, which is the front of the thigh, it's 4 muscles, but it's one that goes below the knee and attaches above the hip, is the one we're mostly concerned about because that influences that hip area. If we're sitting in this shortened position, it has an ability to tighten. Then when we go to walk, we've got a restriction here, which means we don't get that hip extension. We start to hold and we're getting blocked in this position, so we get to hip neutral. And that muscle gets tighter, and that's where we get the influence into the hip area. So what we're going to do is have a look at how we can stretch or roll to release and lengthen out the quad muscle. So we want to make sure we get that length back, but then we're also going to have a look at how we can get your glutes. So the glutes, obviously at the back here, have a massive influence on stopping you getting caught into this hip flex position. The hip flex position is where we're going to be pinching, creating those impingements at the front of the joint and other hip issues that can arise. So have a look at this and understand how your quads can influence what's happening in your hip, and hopefully we can get you a better path and prevent problems later on. Okay, so before we look at rolling and stretching and strengthening, let's see whether your quads are actually tight, and that's probably the essential thing. So this is an easy test you can do at home. So I've got Catherine here just lying on the front. Okay, back nice and relaxed. And what we should be able to do is bring the knee through to 90, and then passively, I can bring the knee through 100, 110, 120 degrees. No movement in her back, no arching, no pressure through here, and so no change. So that's good for a start. What we want to know is, can she do that actively without having to engage the back and arch through there as well, or lift the hip? So very easy at home, you can prop your hands. So if you bring your hands around underneath for me, on both sides, so you can feel whether you're increasing the pressure onto your hands, and then just slowly bend your knee through 90, or go slowly, 90, 100, 110, 120, you get that last bit, there we go, and then relax. Okay, how was that? Is that hard?
On my hamstring.
Sorry?
On my hamstring.
On your hamstring. So there's a lot of extra work having to go into the hamstring here to pull through that last bit. So you can see the passive range is slightly better than the active range. Can't really get past there. So there's a little bit of restriction in there, probably a little bit of activation that we need to do. So test that. If you can't get to 120, then certainly the next phases are going to be important for you. Hi, right, so we've gone through how the quads influence the hip and some of the problems that can be created by the quads being tight and short. So what we're going to do now, I've got Catherine here with a foam roller. We're going to go through rolling as an option. So I'm going to get Catherine to get onto the front. When are you going to use the roller? The roller for me is something that you're going to get into using when the quads are very tight and you're finding it hard to get into an effective stretch, or there's pain influence either from the knee or the hip because of the tightness in there. So I find it's a good place to start. So you come onto your front, onto your elbows, you use your opposite leg to help rock forwards and backwards. You're going to rock all the way through, and what you're looking for initially is where are the tender spots. Now, once you find a tender spot, you can focus your rolling short through that area, or you can roll all the way through, find the tender spot and just stop on it, hold, let it release, and then roll through again. But it's a fantastic way to start to get flexibility into your quads. If I'm doing this pre a run, I don't tend to like doing rolling pre-run, but if you're very tight and you need to get some mobility, I tend to go shorter and quicker and faster. If it's post, I tend to go a little slower and make sure that we're really getting some elongation through there. The main thing is, if you're rolling 30 seconds, a minute maximum, you don't need to be spending 15 minutes on rolling, okay? Short and sharp, it should be effective, you should notice a difference immediately from it, okay? Hope that helps, and we'll look at stretching next. Okay, right, so we've had a look at rolling. My preferred option to release the quads will always be stretching. I find it's much more effective. I don't stretch before exercise, I do movement mobility work. It's much more effective to get you ready for exercise. So you're stretching afterwards. If we're going into a stretch here, I've got Catherine again. So what we're going to do, use a ball for support. You're going to grab your ankle, not your foot. We're not trying to stretch your shin. We're trying to get to the quads, so the front of the thigh. And then once you're there, nice and relaxed, we're going to draw in your ribs to flatten your back. We're going to hold that, make sure you're comfortable breathing. You're going to squeeze the glutes to drive your hip forward. Then you're going to let your knee fall in and bring it in across the midline, not letting go of either of the other points. As you're holding that, you then just bring the leg back. Then you go back to the start, draw the ribs in again, drive the hip forward, and then bring the knee back. There we go. And you'll feel a really effective stretch through that quad muscle. And you just keep working through that process. You're going to hold it for 20 to 30 seconds, and you're going to do 3 to 5 sets to make sure you get an effective stretch and release from it. When you're doing it, you'll find the first 3 will be quite hard and probably quite painful. 4 and 5, it'll start to ease off and start to feel a bit easier, but it's a much more effective way to go to help lengthen out the quads. Okay, so we've gone through influences of quads on the hip and good effective rolling and stretching work. But what we want to do to try and help make sure you get long-term benefit is actually look at what's influencing it. And the quad's greatly influenced by the glutes. If the glute strength is better and the range works well, it's going to help stop the quads dominating around that hip area. So super important we get your glutes working more effectively. So we're going to have a look first here at a nice simple activation exercise. So first thing we need to do is get your brain aware of where your glutes are and how they work so that we know you're being effective. So we're going to do a small knee bend. Now Catherine's going to do this poorly to start with. So she's going up and down, she's very quad dominant, she's flicking her knees back, okay, her weight's rocking forwards into a forefoot, and so she's probably not feeling a lot of work going on, and this is obviously not really going to be effective for what we want to do. So we're going to slow it down, we're going to get your arms across here, we're going to make sure that you're in a neutral back, so just tilt pelvis forwards and backwards and find somewhere you feel in the middle, okay. Then we're going to bring our hands down onto our sitting bone. We're going to make sure that we can feel that working, and then we're going to keep our weight a little more into the heels as we go down, and then we're going to think about lengthening the sitting bone away from the heels or from the floor, so the quads should be more relaxed, and you should feel under your fingertips the glute muscle working. Now it probably won't work at the very top of the range because you're not good at getting into that range yet. As you practice this, it will get better. Now this is about slow and control. I'd like you to do this for 1 to 2 minutes. It's a nice one to do maybe when you're brushing your teeth. And what you're trying to get to is make sure that those glutes stay activated right to the very top of the range, and that you can feel you can do this without the quads fatiguing. The quads, we don't want them taking over. It's not their job. They're supposed to be there for power, explosiveness, not for doing a small knee bend like this day-to-day task. Okay? Okay, so we've had a look at a sort of a lower intensity exercise, so we want to up the workload here, so we're really starting to strengthen the glutes up, which is going to help you when you're doing sports activities, etc. So what we're going to do here is we're going to come back down into line. We've gone into a bridge position. We've got a power bag here to hips. You can use a rucksack at home with some books in it. Just to add some load, we need some load and some weight. We're going to make sure we keep the weight into the heels, find our neutral pelvis, and we're going to bridge up. Now the key here is to bridge up, that's it, and then down. We're going to be inhibiting the quads, focusing on the glutes. Can we bring the feet just a little closer together? Into the middle. There we go. That's it. And we don't want to come all the way up to the top, because most people, unless you're really good, are going to find that as you get to the top, the back kicks in. Okay? And you don't feel your hamstrings? No. Okay, so that's important. It's got to be a glute-focused exercise. If you feel your hamstrings are doing the work, you're going too high up. Start lower. If you feel your back tightening or working super hard, you can put your hand underneath. When you get to the top, you're going too high. Start lower, make sure the focus is on the glutes. As you get better, you'll be able to go more into the range because the quads will have been relaxed and released, and your hamstrings and back won't be trying to do the work. This has to be fatiguing. 4 sets, 30 seconds, but it's got to be a load that makes sure at the end of that 30 seconds, your muscles tired and fatigued. You think, right, I couldn't do another 15 seconds of this. Otherwise, you're not pushing the muscle hard enough to have the change that we want to make it stronger. Okay? Good luck with those. See you soon.